I'll just very briefly introduce them before turning to our first question. So, Medea Benjamin is the co-founder of the women-led peace group in the United States and now internationally CODEPINK, and of the human rights organization Global Exchange. She's a prolific author and has an active presence on social media. And then Yasmin Acar. She is a dedicated human rights activist focused on social justice, refugee rights, and combating anti-Muslim racism. She's based in Germany, and she's a long-standing advocate for Palestinian liberation. She serves on the steering committee of the Freedom Flotilla Coalition and was part of the crew aboard the Madeleine sailing to break the illegal siege on Gaza. And then we have Saif Abu Kishek. He's a Palestinian activist based in Barcelona with over 20 years of experience organizing Palestinian movements across Europe. He serves as a member of the General Secretariat of the Popular Conference for Palestinians Abroad. He's a board member of the European Trade Union Network for Justice in Palestine and is a co-founder of the Palestinian Youth Movement. And then we have Sari Zuaiter. He's a civil engineer and a committed political and professional activist with a long-standing engagement in Palestinian advocacy. He currently serves as the Assistant Secretary General of the Popular Conference for Palestinians Abroad and is the chairman of the founding committee of the Global Coalition Against the Occupation of Palestine. And we also have Dr. Shaheen Kattiparambil. Dr. Shaheen is an academic at the University of Leeds. He is associated with the IndoPal Foundation and led the Asia to Gaza land convoy in 2010, a landmark effort that united activists across Asia to deliver aid to Gaza and advocate for Palestinian rights. And we also have Lindsey German. Lindsey is a lifelong socialist activist, also a prolific writer and a founding member of the Stop the War Coalition, where she currently serves as convener. She's a prominent figure in the anti-war movement in Britain and internationally, and she played a central role in organizing the largest demonstration in British history against the Iraq War in 2003. So a big welcome to our panel and thank you for joining us today. So my first question to our panel: what made it possible for Palestine to gain so much public support in your country in the past year? And I want, first of all, to turn to someone coming perhaps from the belly of the beast, Medea Benjamin.
Well, first let me briefly say what we're up against in the United States, and that is the huge pro-Israel lobby coming both from the Jewish side as well as the very strong evangelical Christian side. We have the weapons industry that is now including not just the weapons, but also the whole surveillance tech center that is so big. And we have the media that has been so pro-Israel that has left us with two parties, Democratic and Republican, that are overwhelmingly pro-Israel, and a White House, whether it's Biden administration or the Trump administration, pro-Israel. So that is what we're up against. But despite all of this, we now have a changed public opinion, and that is quite extraordinary. It's not just among the youth, and it is more among the youth than the older generation, but it is now shown in even the very mainstream Gallup opinion polls, for example, that this pro-Palestine sentiment is across the board and even affects the Republican Party, which is really extraordinary. And so when you see that public opinion, because of the brutality of Israel, because of the social media that they're seeing, has now moved in favor of Palestine, you know that eventually the political establishment is going to have to move as well. But that is going very, very slowly. But I just want to say two things things that give us some hope. One is, among Republicans, there are now, in the influencer community of Republicans who have the podcasts and other things that reach millions of people, you have many of them saying, why do you Republicans talk about America first when you really are Israel first? And that has made a lot of people in the Republican Party start to change. And we're seeing a tiny change among the Christian evangelicals as well. And then among the more progressive community, we see something that has just shaken the Democratic Party to its core, which is the victory in the primary in New York City of Mamdani, somebody who is very much in his core pro-Palestinian, in the city that is the largest Jewish community in the world after Tel Aviv. So this is something very new, very exciting, and I think points to where the future is leading.
Thanks very much indeed, Medea. And then to Saif next for comments.
There are a couple of common points of what was mentioned, specifically when it comes to the brutality of the Zionist entity, aggression and genocidal acts in Palestine, which basically cornered every human on this land into challenging our own beliefs and principles. And this is one of the reasons why you have people from common backgrounds who have never been involved in any activism going to the street and participating in protests and wanting to be involved in many other actions. The recent march that we have organized to Cairo, to Egypt, to break the siege, we had so many participants who never had activism background, that they never participated in solidarity work, and they wanted to be part of standing against the complicity of their own government. But I think most of all, what motivates people right now to continue working for Palestine is the resilience of the Palestinian people. Mm-hmm. So for the past 20 months in Gaza, people have been under the most brutal starvation campaign that we have ever seen in recent history, the continuous bombing and all of that, and we still see people resisting and people pushing back. The annexation of West Bank a couple of days ago, with people still going out in protest, and people are not surrendering, people are not stopping to resist, and most over of all 78 years of occupation, and people are still resisting. If there is any inspiration for movements to grow and to continue to work, it has to come from this kind of context. If we look at the Spanish context in specific, also the Spanish state is traditionally a social movement space. So people work with different grassroots, they work with different backgrounds, and this made it also easier to mobilize and to get people involved. The recent declaration of the Catalan parliament a couple of days ago about the Zionist being a racist illegal movement, and also the illegality of transferring ships with weapons through the ports of Barcelona. There are so many factors where it allowed for Palestine to continue being the center of all mobilizations and activism. But at a certain point, we have to look at it as an ethical, moral obligation today. It's the fight between good and evil. There is no question in that. And I think anyone that does not stand today against genocide is complicit. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So, and Lindsey, you indicated you want to come in briefly on this before the next question.
I just wanted to add one thing, which sometimes is forgotten, which is that in Britain, we've had now a long period of working particularly with the Muslim community. And I think one of the weaknesses in some countries is where you don't get that unity. We've had the unity of the peace movement, the left, and the Muslim community. And I think that's been it was tremendously important around Iraq, but I think it's tremendously important around Palestine. So we get these very, very big and diverse demonstrations and lots of local activity. And I think it's one lesson we should take from today. I'd be interested in other people's experiences in different countries, but it's very important for us.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I'll move to the next question then. So this is one on tactics for our movement. What tactics, online campaigns, art, protests, student or labour organising have been most effective, and why? So, Yasmin, I'm going to turn to you, first of all, on this one, please.
Well, I'm from Germany, and to have these spaces have to be created. And we created these spaces since many, many years. The Palestine Solidarity Movement has always been criminalized, not just after October, but always, because the biggest Palestine community diaspora is in Europe, is in Germany, especially in Berlin, where I come from, where you see all these brutal videos. Germany is a fascist country, a very, very fascist country, targeting Palestinians, Arabs, Muslims, and it's becoming very, very bad. And in a country where they pass resolutions which are not legally binding, it's purely a political statement, symbolic, to protect, preserve Jewish life, because we are being accused of anti-Semitism with everything we say we do. And these resolutions hinder us, they shrink every space, cultural, the streets, universities, schools, everything you can imagine. So it gets really, really difficult and hard to fight for justice. But what we do, we use every platform that we have at hand to document in real time the state repressions, and we still, push for what the state is doing, which is basically illegal, and we don't give up. But in Germany, especially, it's becoming almost impossible.
Thanks very much. And then Lindsey, any comment on tactics?
Well, in Britain, we've had, I think, 29 now national demonstrations since October the 7th, 2023. And those have been, as I just said, very, very large demonstrations. I think the smallest have been kind of 80,000. And they've been extremely important because they've been, to me, they're ways of bringing people together that they then go and do all sorts of local activity. And I think, there's always sometimes an argument, how much do you want direct action? How much do you want A to B marches, which always strikes me as an odd formulation, given that any march has to be from A to B or A to C or whatever it is. It doesn't mean very much. But to me, these things aren't mutually exclusive. They're ways in which you begin to galvanise a movement, and bringing people together in large numbers shows solidarity to the Palestinians themselves, and we know that they recognise this, but also encourages our own supporters to keep turning out. And one of the things we find is that, and somebody else has already referred to this, that you get people who turn up on the demonstrations, even now, who haven't been on one before, who haven't stewarded before, and who want to get involved. And I think we need to recognise this is a growing movement, actually. And just to add, we've got loads of very, very good celebrities who support us. We've had the controversies, as people will know, over kneecap and various other things that have gone on. We've got Juliet Stevenson, who's a kind of national treasure of a sort of well-known actress in this country, who's been absolutely brilliant, and many, many others as well. But we're always constantly trying to think of new things. And we had, some people may have been on it last night, we had this very successful demonstration outside Downing Street where people brought pots and pans, and we banged them for quite a long time, as it turned out. Probably Keir Starmer wasn't in Downing Street, but if he was, he will have heard them. And I think those sorts of things, we need to expand some of those things so that everybody in every town and every village in Britain can do some of these things and show solidarity with the Palestinians, because it is absolutely massive in this country, as it is in most places. Very, very large numbers of people identify, especially now when you see people starving and children starving. People who perhaps wouldn't have supported it a few months ago now are.
Thanks very much. Would anyone else like to comment on effective?
I think also, in addition to what our colleague said, is how to find, how to solve the equation between having an activity that disrupts the real life going on with complicitness and not breaking the law. I mean, if you keep doing the same things, staying aside with a big demonstration without affecting the real life of the country, you still not affecting it. How can you do this with without breaking the law, but still pressuring the governments in depth, like rushing into the airports or so on. I don't know exactly what, but my point is the activity should raise in a way to really pressure the governments and to make some disruption of the ongoing situation without breaking the law. How is it to do that? This is the challenge, in my opinion.
Thanks. And Saif, you wanted to come in?
Yes, I just wanted to refer to the unions space. And I think it's a little bit challenging that until now we were not able to organize a massive strike. There were some intents in different countries. We had a very successful one in Spain. But this is something that after 20 months of genocide that needs to be included. While I totally agree with the importance of protests and that it shows a public rejection to the complicity and the government actions, people are a little bit fed up with also protests. And we need to, within the movement, we need to be creative and think how we can keep people engaged, because many people approach and say, okay, we just go, we protest, but we don't see an outcome. There is nothing tangible that we can do. And it is on us to bring this to action. So maybe exploring unions, seeing how we can be more involved with unions, getting them, because we count on them for factories that are producing weapons. We count on them for shipments. We count on them for port stuff. They present an important aspect of the current struggle that we are doing. I think it's one of the elements that might be useful to include in this space as a strategy for the future and tacticals.
And of course, we followed very closely the activities by the dock workers, for example, in Genoa and Marseille and in Piraeus. And of course, people may have been aware that the Unite the Union, trade union, Britain's biggest trade union, at their conference recently voted that they would support their members who chose not to handle arms shipments and so on. So that's a positive step. But of course, we need more of that kind of action internationally. So, of course, there are differences in tactics. People have the same goal, but perhaps different ways of working. So how do we manage differences between groups, generations, or political views while staying united? Because, of course, unity is the most crucial goal. I will turn first to Shaheen on this question.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. Coming from India, where we have, and this question is very relevant because we have numerous political affiliations, faiths, even linguistic regions as well. And we are also living under an authoritarian regime as well, you could say. And of late, activism on Palestine has become comparatively clamped down by government as well. Even recently, there was yesterday, protests were denied by the High Court as well in Bombay, the largest cities in India. So what we do there is that, one, we try to see a shared minimum principle, to have a common minimum principle that is sort of consensus between different groups. That is ceasefire, end of occupation, decolonization, these being the common demands. And also to unify these groups in a country as vast as India, with the difficulties that we have in mobilizing sometimes, is to use a network model that we've been using for some time now. That rather than having a central hierarchy, it is different groups taking on different tasks. For example, scholars, politicians, and sometimes online celebrities, they are given a specific task to do, and in difference in student groups, activist groups, different tasks in that sense. And there's also a generational difference as well. So what we try to implement in sort of workshops is intergenerational learning. That is, we create deliberate spaces where younger activists who share digital skills, they are mentored by senior activists who provide historical perspective and sort of organizational memory as well.
Thanks very much. And Sari, do you want to come in on this one?
Yes, I think we need to have a common ground try to have a general but specific common ground among others. If you put, let's say, for working against starvation, everybody, I think, would go with you, and then you put the Palestinian and the Gazan case as a simple sample of that. I understand that not all movements, not all people stand on the same platform, but we have to find common grounds in relation to the Palestinian problem and to the Gazan genocide that is going on. What is the common ground? We are talking about genocide, we are talking about starvation, we are talking about complicitness, and so on. So trying to unify between all of these goals is really hard, but is attainable if we are doing a general thing, not a very specific thing.
Thank you. And now coming in, Medea, and anyone else who wants to after.
Well, I wanted to say that it's not always possible to find common ground, and that while we tried to unite what in the U.S. you would just say the left and the right. In the past, it has worked, for example, around Yemen, where we got the different sides to come together and say the U.S. should stop supporting Saudi Arabia by sending them weapons that was used to kill people in Yemen, and that actually worked. It hasn't worked in the case of Israel, and I think what has been very difficult for us is how do you find common ground with people who are very different in their political philosophies, and yet we agree the U.S. shouldn't be supporting Israel. But in the Republican Party, they tend to be extremely racist. And at a point in our history right now where the agency called ICE is going into people's homes, their workplaces, capturing people, kidnapping them, throwing in them detention centers in other countries, how do you make allegiance with that same political party when you disagree on other very fundamental things? So I think what we have decided is the way to do it is not by being in trying to create any kind of alliances that are visible, where we do protest together, because then people will say to us, why are you working with these racists? But to do it in more of a behind-the-scenes kind of fashion. And that seems to be working for the moment, but I just want to say sometimes these alliances just can't be visible.
Okay, yeah.
One word. I give an example of the discussion we had in our alliance of the name. We had a long discussion, and then we came with against occupation, the global alliance against occupation, because occupation, in our belief, is the core of the problem, and nobody in the world who is a normal human being would support occupying land or occupying one nation to the other. So if you go to the core of the thing, maybe you can gather people from all around.
Yeah.
Just briefly, and I think something that it's relevant and important for us to acknowledge and be aware. What I have seen recently in many spaces, that sometimes those differences are not political. Like, it's not about strategy. It's not about the type of activism we want to do. It's not about that we don't agree at the politics of what we want to do. It's because I don't like this person. I think his approach is aggressive. I don't like the way that he talks, and so many interpersonal conflict that impacts our space. And seeing the genocide that is happening in Palestine and not acknowledging that this is one of the main factors that actually fragmenting and dividing our movements is an issue. I think we need we have the obligation to work around that and put those personal opinions aside and focus on the task that we have at hand. It has been used a lot as a justification for disagreement, but I think it's about time to acknowledge it.
Thanks very much. So I'm going to move on now. So certainly here in Britain, in the past few weeks and months, we've seen intensifying repression and restrictions and legislation against our Palestine solidarity movement. So the next question is going to address this. In what ways have governments or institutions tried to silence or punish Palestine solidarity? How are people pushing back, and what methods are most effective to this end? And I'm going to turn first of all to Yasmin and then Lindsey. Yasmin.
Well, earlier I wrote something down, and it says, when governments try to silence us with bans and repression, every act of defiance becomes a megaphone for Palestine, as well as for all oppressed people around the world. So, earlier I talked about, these not legally binding resolutions, and they shrink all of these spaces, and not just in one country, but it's spreading everywhere. And if we cannot focus on that one country where these things are born, then we won't be able to stop this spreading wildfire. And many times what I've been observing is that activists are left alone to deal with these things, because as Saif said, there's so many activists around the world that have not been active before. They don't have the necessary experience, and then you have a country that you have like a handful of people that are experienced, but they are also fighting against very strong states, very complicit states. So we don't have the necessary support system that goes beyond borders. And this is what we are trying to build with movements like the Freedom Flotilla, to tell, to make the first step and say we have to resist, we cannot stay silent, and we have to continue with this. So, what we do is we just continue, and we do it in silence sometimes. We cannot be obvious about it, because, for example, in Germany, when we organized the Palestine Congress, which was open because we didn't know that this also would be criminalized, Ghassan Abu Sitta, he wasn't allowed into Germany. And so what we do now is we work in silence. We organize even flash mobs, knowing that we will be beaten. If you've seen the videos coming out of Berlin 3-4 days ago, children as young as 15 years old were beaten, hospitalized. So what we are up against right now is we can organize openly, publicly, we can organize in silence, but at the end of the day, it will be criminalized, people will lose their jobs. So we have to come to a point where we organize beyond borders. We have to create groups, we have to create, committees, coalitions that go beyond borders, so that while these repressions are spreading like wildfire, our resistance and solidarity does the same.
Thank you, Yasmin. Lindsey.
Yeah, I think everywhere people are facing a lot of repression over the Palestine movement, and I think we should understand why that is. It's because actually they're losing the argument, Israel is losing the argument, and therefore the people who support Israel in this country, the government, the media, and so on and so forth, are more and more in support of draconian laws. I mean, Britain, as people may know, isn't by any means the most repressive country, I'm sure, represented here. But what we've seen in the last few years, not just over Palestine, but increasingly over Palestine, is a big attack on civil liberties and on the right to protest. We have people who've been proscribed in terms of Palestine Action, who've under the terror laws. So anybody who identifies with them, supports them, and so on, can be arrested under the terror laws, which is quite a lot more serious than many other laws that you can be arrested on. We've also had in our own movement that some of the leaders of the movement have been arrested and charged. This is true of Ben and Chris, who are here today, and who are coming up for trial in a year's time. So you're kept for a year, sometimes with bail conditions. There are the people who were involved in the attack on Bryce Norton will not have their trial until 2027, which again is a major attack on their civil liberties. So this is happening all the time. And even yesterday on the demonstration, they imposed a restriction order at 6:08 after the demonstration had started. Why? To criminalise people who tried to get on the road. I mean, it failed completely. But this is the kind of thing they're doing all the time. How do we deal with it? Well, it seems to me we have to organise and obviously organised internationally, and that's obviously one of the points of the conference today. But also, how do you fight repression like this? You have to firstly defend anybody who is under attack in this kind of way, and that's what we try to do, even if we don't necessarily agree with all their programme or with the tactics that they've carried out. But also, you have to keep organising, you have to keep demonstrating, you have to keep lobbying the MPs, you have to keep doing all the things that we're doing, because that's the only way you can begin to guarantee civil liberties. And the history of this country is they didn't let men have the vote, working class men, they didn't let women have the vote, they didn't let trade unions be organised. All of those were defeated over the years by people taking political action, taking direct action, and so on. And that's the kind of thing we're going to have to do again.
Thanks very much, Lindsey. And now I've just had a note. We have 25 minutes until lunch break. So I'm going to quickly put my final question for some very quick answers, and then I'll be turning to you. Perhaps the person who handed me the note can tell me how I can access the comments coming via Zoom. Final question. Where are we lacking coordination across countries or sectors, and what kinds of support systems do we need to build that? So I'm going, first of all, to Sari.
Yes, I think one of the major challenges of these movements, and especially maybe in our alliance also, is that we don't have full-time devoted staff to follow up everything. I mean, part-time work give you part-time results. We need resources, we need full-time devoted staff, and we need to follow up on and verify the goals and verify the parties that we are addressing and trying to get into our alliance. Of course, trying to work on different levels across the board is not easy, but it could and it should be done quickly.
Thank you. And then final point now to Shaheen.
One thing that I felt lacking was, for example, a lack of South-South network and solidarity. For example, we know a lot of tremendous work being done in Malaysia, Indonesia, other places in the global South, in South Asia, specifically in South Asia. But there is a sort of disconnect between activism and coordination between these groups in various nations. So some sort of transnational network, at least in Asia as well. Then also, one of the most covered activism was campus activism back home as well. At the same time, there's also labor unions. So we see few sustained links between campus activism and labor unions despite having similar goals. And last but not the least is the area of limited resource sharing. For example, access to legal support, and importantly, digital security training. It always happens that we have these closed meetings and it always gets out in the open. So there is a lack of such training which we don't give attention to. These are some of the things that we try to focus of late, these things.
Thanks very much. So thanks, panel, for that first part of the session. Now, does someone have a roving mic, or what's going to happen with the... Yeah, there's a roving mic. So who would like to come in first with a question or comment? Gentleman there in the blue T-shirt. There's a mic coming over to you. Feel free to put them to individual members or the panel as a whole, and then maybe one or two panel members can pick it up. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. My name is Gary Müller. I'm from Switzerland, the most peaceful country in the world. Okay. So we made international law, we made the Geneva Convention, etc., etc. But at the end, most of the Swiss people are on the side of Israel. Yeah. That's very clear. It's a traditional situation. So how we can change the brain of Swiss? So I asked a lot of people, what are Palestinians? They have no idea about Palestinians. They are shepherds. Okay, in Switzerland we have also shepherds. But they have also other duties in Switzerland, also in Palestine. So we tried on a way of psychological and economical way to change the brain of Swiss people. One of this brain changing was this. So we gave 22,000 such cards to Swiss people who are going with the train to work. So they have time to scan it. And then you see alongside about Palestinians how great they are. And we could check, because they give us always a point, check how many people read that. From 22,000 read 16,000 the text. So it's in German, it's in French, and also in English. Secondly, entrepreneurs in Switzerland are very happy if they have good entrepreneurs in other countries. But why not in Palestine? Okay, we made an organization, Swiss Palestine Joint Business Council, and to work directly with Palestinian entrepreneurs.
Can you wind up quite soon? I've got quite a lot of hands, so if you could be quite quick in your contribution.
I try.
You've got a lot of people
only
wanting to join in.
4 points. Secondly, we are now importing products of Palestine, and Swiss people are amazed about these products: soap, wine, beer, etc. Thirdly, we have a Palestine Arts Film Festival, what we are doing together with Palestinian designers, for example, but also a cooperation with people who have who need something architecture. We sell this job to the Palestinians. So this is a possibility that Swiss people change the brain and see, oh my God, they are very good educated. And if you ask the World Bank said 2017, that the Palestinians are the best educated community in the world. World Bank, it's not my interpretation, it's the interpretation of World Bank. And I think this must change the brain, psychological, but also economical, that more Swiss people, and perhaps also your people, can support the fight for a free Palestine.
Thank you very much. Right, so sorry I'm making everyone be quick, but we have limited time. So I've got the friend at the back there in the T-shirt, Sauda.
Thank you very much.
Chris, the friend there, and then Dr. Barghouti at the front.
Fabulous. Thank you so very much. And first, thank you to everybody for coming out. Any time that we get together and talk about Palestine is so very important, particularly Dr. Mustafa Barghouti. A big thanks for coming so far from Palestine. I will say on all of it, it's so very important when we talk about Palestine that Palestinians get to speak. One of the things that is really worrying me is the talk about a two-state solution and recognition of a two-state solution. We need to be very clear that this is a concept about salvaging Zionism and salvaging this notion of a Jewish state. Yeah? The genocide, the blood that has been spilt in Gaza is not to save this Jewish supremacist state. Recognition is not about self-determination for Palestinian people. Palestinians will not accept the Bantustans that are left in East Palestine, which they call the West Bank. Palestinians in Gaza, in East Palestine, in Jerusalem, in 48, and us in diaspora deserve justice and liberation, and that looks like a free Palestine from the river to the sea for everyone. For everyone. And the fight that we have and the movement that we've built is a space for everyone. It's an anti-racist, anti-colonial movement. And I'm so proud of my Jewish siblings and brothers and sisters who join us and every other spectre of society that sees the liberation of Palestine as a liberation for everyone. So I'd like to put that to the panel and perhaps get some feedback on that.
Thanks very much. Thank you. I'll take some more contributions. So there was Chris there and then the friend there.
Thanks to the panel and to the organisers. I just wanted to make 2 points which maybe can help spark some conversation. One is, despite the escalating horror and clearly in a situation which is very uneven from what people are saying and we all know, it is important to recognise that we as a movement are making a difference. The European powers are now divided on the question of Palestine. In Britain, Parliament is divided on that question. The media are now reflecting the anger that people feel in this country. The mass media is. And I think it's important that we do recognise that, not because clearly it means that there isn't a huge amount to do and that we need to move from rhetoric to practice, but because it is the key argument to persuade people that this movement is worth pursuing, that we have to continue, and not just continue, but to grow the movement. The second point, my final point, is for us in Britain, I think, the key strategic question now is how do we go from a historically massive movement to a movement that actually begins to involve the tens of millions of people now who agree with us. That's the question. How do we go from an impressive mass movement to a movement that has the social weight that mobilizes literally or touches the majority of people in this country and has therefore the social weight to make support for the genocide simply impossible? That's the question we have to ask ourselves, and that's the question I think we now have to answer.
Thanks very much. So in the limited time we have left, I'm going to take the friend there with the glasses near Chris. Then I'm going to take Dr. Barghouti, the friend there, Zahir, and then we'll come back to the panel. Okay, so
Dr. Barghouti.
friend there in the glasses. Who had their hand up? No, sorry, no. Okay, I'll take you and then I'll come to the person behind. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, I have one question, if possible. How do you measure the impact of what you've been doing during the last 21 months on, in two aspects, on the media in your country or in your area, and also on the authorities? Do you have examples of how things changed during the last 21 months? That's one thing. And second, I have to make an announcement that I skipped in my speech. I should have said that. I want you to know that the Palestinian non-governmental organizations in Palestine, on behalf of Palestinian civil society, have declared, called on all the people of the world, including Palestinians, Arabs, and internationals everywhere in the world, to participate in a hunger strike tomorrow, on Sunday. It will be a global day of solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza against the starvation. So I hope you can spread the message. And if you need the documentation, I can give it to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Barghouti. There was a hand behind you somewhere. I can't. Okay, hand behind you there. Yeah, that lady there. And then we're coming over here.
Thank you very much. My name is Sophia MacLeod from Scottish Palestine Solidarity Campaign. And thank you for the panel. I think it's been really interesting discussion. I think a key challenge before us after 22 months of the genocide is how we are still organising. There's still demonstrations, there's actions. The movement is actually very deep and varied and creative. It is, we have to recognise, it's a grassroots movement, right? There's a lot of organisations and people that have come out and been part of the movement. But there's also despair because of the continuing genocide and the worsening situation, not just in Gaza, in the occupied territories, in the West Bank, and inside Israel for Palestinians. So how do we move that? And the questions have already been asked about how we do that. I think it's about focus. It's about being strategic. You know, in the documents that we're looking at, in terms of, and the questions that have been asked already, there is an answer. Actually, the Palestine Solidarity Movement has an answer to that question of what do we do. You know, there's marching and then there's direct action. There's something else in between there, and we've had it for 20 years, and that's the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement. And we are getting wins. You know, we're asking the question, where are the successes? We have seen, you know, in this country, in other countries, councils, local authorities making decisions to divest. We have, you know, unions taking positions. So I'm just saying, I think we need to work that in. We may have varied tactics and approaches, but unless we find not just we're all working for Palestine, whatever that means, there's a lot in it, is we need to be a bit more targeted, I think, and just to recognise what we do. And just one thing about despair, I think there's something about harnessing the collective power, because people don't experience that anywhere else, you know.
Okay.
They're not taught in the workplace or whatever to say you have power as a collective.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry to hurry everyone, but we've got to get feedback from the panel as well. So there's the friend there, this lady with her hand up. Then we're coming to Zahir, and then we...
Thanks to the organizers. I come from Spain. I'm from the Basque Country. And I wanted to say that I agree with some of the friends. It's super important, the pedagogy, to explain people that this is a political issue, it's not a humanitarian issue, that this is an anti-Zionist struggle. We have to say clearly. And I think also we have to share with the people that this is an internationalist struggle. Different people in different countries fighting against the same monster. And the Zionism affects us as a society, as a people. So we have to explain clearly, no, to the people. And two things for us important to solve this challenge is one, leave our comfort zones. Please, we have to go out of our groups. We did many things, many conferences, for our people, and we are all the same people. We have to move to villages, we have to move to schools, not only universities, to neighborhood associations, to explain the people, because when people knows and understand, and we can reach our brain and our heart and their heart, they get involved, always. And the second point, and I finish, I think is very, very, very important. The most important thing is to reach sport people and cultural people. Messi has much impact than Macron worldwide. So it's super important. We focus, for me, too much in economic boycott, and it's much important because they have a social impact, brutal, no?
Okay,
so I
thank
think
you.
We have to coordinate.
Thank you very much. And then final question or comment from Zahir, and then we turn to the audience. Sorry, the panel.
Thank you, Kate. It is just to reflect on a question raised during the discussion in the panel, how to unite the movement and how to make it more influential in mobilization and in having impact on the governments. I believe in general, and everyone maybe share this with me, that political alliances mainly rely on the idea of focusing on the common grounds as a key factor for joint action, coordination, and even uniting the efforts and pooling resources to make work stronger and more effective. Now, a clear example of this, I believe, here in the UK, is the UK Alliance for Palestine, which consists of the main 6 organizations in the country, which established maybe 20 years ago or 22 years ago, and managed to work together in all these 22 years without any real differences or big disputes. So that is an example to work depending on the main grounds, because these 6 organizations are not the same political backgrounds, not the same cultural background, not the same religion background. So that makes it possible to unite the forces in the UK in order to make this a huge impact in the society and sometimes in the government. So I think this idea is used as a basis for this conference today. So we need this to happen in every country and to have all of these countries united in this global alliance for Palestine. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Zahir. So now turning to our panel. So I'm going to take you just straight across, starting at Lindsey's end and then working across. So just a maximum 2 minutes each to hit our deadline.
Okay, just firstly, very much to agree with what Zahir's just said. The truth is that you have to leave your differences at the door, and there are lots of differences in terms of people's analysis, in terms of their priorities, in terms of who they think are the most important people to get along. So you have to say, okay, what is it we do agree on? And for example, the comrade at the back who spoke about the one state, two state debate, which I tend to agree with a lot of what he said. But the idea that we should limit this to people who want two state or who want one state and exclude the others, I think would be a mistake in terms of the kind of demonstrations that we're going on. So I think it's very, very important we do talk about the common ground, and then you can get a great deal of agreement. And you don't, you can go off and do your own meetings, you can go off and do your own activities, which we all do. All 6 organisations do that, but we unite around the big demonstrations and other activities that we think are important. The second point I just wanted to make was in response to Dr. Barghouti's thing. How do we measure the impact of the movement on the media and on the authorities? It's extremely hard, and it means that people, the point that was made about despair, I think all of us feel despair that we haven't shifted our government even further. We haven't managed to get them to do these kind of things. But we have made some impact in terms of what the government is not able to do. For example, at the beginning, we had the slogan "From the river to the sea." The government and the police tried to make that illegal. They tried to arrest people for chanting that. Now everybody does it on every demonstration and nobody ever gets arrested. We get arrested for other things, but not for that. And these kind of things, I think, are extremely important, that we do make an impact. I don't know if people saw last week a man at the Royal Opera House got up and held the Palestine flag. Yeah. And the director of the Royal Opera House came from the wings and really tried to fight him to take the flag away, and he couldn't do it. And that tells you that's gone very deep in the movement. The fact that this guy won't get another job at the Royal Opera House after it was the last night of this particular opera. He won't be invited back there, but he did it, and people are doing that all over the country. And so I think that impact is there. It's not enough, but we are building it, and we should always have that hope that we are bringing in more and more people to
Thanks very much, Lindsey. Yasmin?
I wish I could say the same about Germany when it comes to From the River to the Sea. There was some impact, successes. Some states it's allowed, but in Berlin, for example, in the capital, it's not. People get criminalized, deported even. For this slogan. I want to touch on 3 things, and I'm going to keep it.
Okay, I've just had a note saying we have exactly 5 minutes before we need to break for lunch. So I'm going to ask everyone to do 1 comment.
Okay.
1 minute each. Sorry.
So about this one state, two state solution, it's a big discussion everywhere, but especially in Germany. Germany, it's just lip service. For Germany to say we want a 2-state solution, and they say it for many, many years, they have to first accept and recognize Palestine. This has not happened, never. And before we go on 1 or 2 state solution, is my political opinion, we have to be able to speak about the resistance. We are not allowed to do that. No one does that. Everyone is scared because of persecution. But we have to talk about it, because if we don't, then we will accept the narrative of the Zionists that Palestine is a land without a people and therefore has no right to self-defense. Okay. So we have to jump over these hurdles. And just a quick note on unity. Yes, we have to leave our differences at the door, but maybe we can achieve that if we understand how we unite. At what cost did the world unite? It's at the cost of Palestinian lives, and maybe this is the first step that we need to understand, and maybe that will enable us to leave these differences at the door.
Thanks very much indeed. Saif next. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just gonna about the time. I think we could cut from the lunch instead of cutting from.
Well, you talk to them.
It's
not my decision.
People coming from all over the place to actually discuss and see how we can get through it. Just to answer to the question that we received from Dr. Mustafa, I think in Spain we have seen a response in terms of popular pressure. So we have seen the government recognizing the Palestinian state. We have seen the embargo campaign by the government. We have seen the municipalities cutting relationships with other municipalities that they had agreements before. So yes, there is an outcome, and I think it's not enough, and we need to mobilize more. One of the reasons that of these spaces, we focus and we make lots of theories about what we should do and how we should do it and the political background that we should build there, instead of discussing about the action itself and just let's go and do it. And a simple example, and last month, literally, we had 3 campaigns running at the same time. And honestly, to have a workshop about tactics and not mention boat handala at any moment is an issue with the way that we are working. The boat might be intercepted at any moment, and I think also it's very important to acknowledge those things that are happening at the same time. We had by land, by sea, by air going to break the siege on Gaza with 3 big movements that happened at the same time, and not much time was spent on the theoretical part of aspect. And then the outcome of this movement right now is hopefully next month or the one after, we are going to have the global Sumud Flotilla, which are tens of ships that are going to move through the Mediterranean to break the siege on Gaza. And I think we need to get into that mentality of doing rather than talking.
Okay.
Just put all that aside.
Thank you very much. And then next.
As to Dr. Barghouti's question, yes, in Jordan is boiling, according to what I see, and taking into consideration that a big part of the population is from Palestinian origin. The movement and the impact was up and down. In the beginning, it was demonstration all over and support all over. Then the government retreated back and they started to stop all kind of activities, including sending money and aid. But at the last week and the recent days, I think the pressure on the government was very high, so that they, in spite of the big blockade and complete blockade to send aid to Gaza, the Jordanian government, they sent some aid to Gaza because they want to release some pressure from the population in Jordan. As to what should be done, I think we need creative ideas. And I think one of the simplest ideas is locking the gates of the complicit embassies in the world. This is a very simple idea, but it made a big impact. So we need to find a new and creative ideas to keep going on.
Thanks very much. Medea, over to you.
Yes, I think in terms of answering the question of what have we achieved, well, obviously it's not nearly what we need to achieve, but yes, the media is changed. We see exposés now in the U.S. mainstream media about the Gaza, quote, humanitarian foundation. We see scholars of genocide like Omar Bartov, who gets a huge article in the New York Times explaining why this definitely is a genocide. We at CODEPINK, some of us have been going around every day in our Congress, every single day. How much money do you take from AIPAC? Why do you take money from AIPAC? We see more and more members of Congress pledging not to take money from AIPAC. We have seen, when we go around also every day saying, do you think the American people want a war with Iran? It really put them on the spot. And I think the divisions in the White House around Iran were very clear to see. And for the moment, knock on wood, after Trump saying we've destroyed Iran's nuclear capabilities, which obviously wasn't true, the American people came clearly out and said we don't want a war with Iran. And then in terms of Israel and the weapons, I would say a year ago I would be astonished if what happened actually happened, which is that 40% of the Democrats in the Senate voted to cut off weapons to Israel. So that is a super achievement. And the last thing I want to say is that I mentioned ICE, the agency that goes out and starts kidnapping people. Well, it's doing it in all the communities across the country to all different people in the diaspora. But the face, the most known face of the ICE opposition is Mahmoud Khalil, the Palestinian. And there is tremendous support for him. In fact, he was just at Congress meeting with all kinds of senators and members members of the House, and to say that in every community we are organized to keep ICE out of our communities. It's hard to go to one of those demonstrations without seeing Palestinian flags all over. So people are organized in their communities.
Thank you, Medea. Fantastic. And then finally, Shaheen, you to the last word.
Yeah, I'll keep it short. So there's an ideological convergence between the present Indian government and the Israeli regime. So things are not easy, but in response to what Dr. Barghouti asked in terms of impact, I don't know if people know here that the Israeli police uniforms were manufactured in India, in a southern state called Kerala in India. And due to mobilization protests, that contract has been cancelled last year.
Wow.
That is a result of regional and local mobilization. So that is some of the impacts I could just got out of my head, yeah.
Thank you so much. So big round of applause for our fantastic panel. Thank you and enjoy your lunch.